Are you a practitioner helping families plan for their futures? Do you specialise in trusts, inheritance and estate planning? If so, join STEP, the leading global network of trust and estate professionals. Whether you're an expert or just starting out, we're here for every stage of your career. Trial the STEP Journal for free at www.step.org/today and see what membership can offer you.
You're listening to the Today's Wills and Probate podcast, one of the leading sources of information for the wills and probate sector. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todayswillsandprobate.co.uk and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Wills and Probate podcast. We take a sideways step, I think, today. In the course of the podcast, we are going to talk about estate planning and will writing, but we're also going to talk about music because my guest today is John Heavens. John is the CEO of Your Legacy Solutions and also, quite unusually, a professional musician. Not a combination that you come across very often. So delighted to have you on the podcast, John. Thanks a lot for joining.
David, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. And we've just been talking before we started recording about some of your recent exploits. You've been over to Spain doing some recording for a new video that you're putting out as well. In the first instance, tell us about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Because there's obviously an awful lot more to John Heavens than meets the eye.
If you ask that question to those closest to me, my wife, my family, who am I? They would give you a very different answer, I suspect. I think they would say somebody who constantly tries to juggle too much. But that's the nature of what I do. Fundamentally, I'm a director, and I've 20 years now, director of an estate planning company. My most recent venture, which launched in 2019, is Your Legacy Solutions. We're coming up for our 5th year now as a business. Alongside that, I run a professional music career as well. So I'm signed to a record label in London called Jazz Is It, jazz and blues record label. I have a professional management company who manage all of my music management, which is a company called Much Fruit Productions. The lovely Leneve Austin, former band member of M People, if you remember those. I find a way of juggling those two things.
First, what instruments do you play, John?
Principally, I'm a vocalist. I was trained at Trinity College of Music in Greenwich as a vocalist. My second instrument was flute, although I've been playing flute since I played in the school orchestra, actually, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, which is here behind me. But fundamentally, I'm a vocalist and I'm a flautist as well. But my flute playing is not in a classical context. It's actually in jazz, Latin and blues, principally. But I do play, I play piano, not insofar as I can play piano in a concert setting, but I use it principally for composition. I also play percussion as well. So I sort of dance around between those various things and have done over the years.
What is it about jazz that kind of really appeals to you? Why jazz?
My mum was a jazz and blues vocalist. All of her
that'll help. Definitely.
All of her adult life, she had a period of singing in blues and jazz clubs, around the area where she lived. She was also a pianist as well. She played something called stride piano. It's a particular style of piano playing that became very sort of popular in amongst jazz and blues. It goes back further, David, because I've got an ancestry that was very much in music. I think I get the generations right here. Great grandfather was the organist in Melbourne Cathedral in Australia, and various other kind of musicians through the generation. So it was there somewhere in the genes.
How fantastic. There's a way that we can kind of contrive this discussion that somehow music and estate planning go together. But I suspect we'll probably talk much more about music because, as I say, I don't think I've ever had a professional musician on the podcast before. I mean, in all seriousness, how do you juggle that life between professional musician, which I assume kind of takes you on the road, as you say, you've just recently come back from Spain, and the need to be kind of present to, actually just to run a business, just simple as that?
The first thing for me is I have to be super organized and really good with the diary, incredibly disciplined. So, today, much like any other day, was very typical. My day starts at 5:30 in the morning. Nothing happens in my world until I've had at least 2 cups of tea or a cup of coffee, and then I kind of get into my day, which usually starts with an hour of flute practice, sometimes a bit of vocal practice as well. And then I have quite a disciplined workout routine as well. It's unusual for me not to do a workout of some kind during the day. I mean, as a vocalist and a flautist, the physical side of what I do is actually very important as well. So in particular, kind of keeping the airways going. So hour of flute practice, half an hour of kind of workout, and then I get into my working day usually 8 o'clock in the morning, and then I have to flip my attention really then to being very disciplined on dealing with the legal stuff that we do as well. I think that's one part. The other part is that I've just been very blessed. I've got absolutely superb people around me. My lovely wife Ali being one of the most important in my world, insofar as she keeps me on the straight and narrow. Andrew Cooper, who's my co-director at Your Legacy Solutions, this is somebody in their late 20s who's got ahead of a 45 or 50-year-old. Just amazingly well-grounded and a super bright guy, very capable. That's a great help as well.
I was going to say it must be important to have people around you, and again, if there's a music analogy here, it's just as important to have a decent band around you as well, presumably.
Yeah, very good. As far as the music is concerned, I'm equally sort of blessed in that department as well, because from an early stage, when I came out of music college, which was in Greenwich, which was many, many years ago, I was fortunate enough to kind of network with people who are in the industry. I was offered a role in a musical theatre, which I declined because musical theatre wasn't really my thing. I always knew I wanted to be a performer, and from very early on, my vocal coach was a lady called Trudy Kerr, and another lady called Jackie Dankworth, who was the daughter of Cleo Lane, who's just very sadly passed. And they were really instrumental in making sure I had the right people around me. Trudy's husband is Jeff Gascoigne, amazing producer and bass player himself, and he's in fact playing bass on my album launch in May the 9th next year in London. So I think between them, Derek Nash, those who have been to a Jules Holland gig, I don't know whether Jules Holland band, but those who've been to Jules Holland gig would know Derek as the principal saxophonist in Jules Holland band, and sound engineers been again helped me enormously in terms of making this work in the music industry.
If there's another analogy between music and estate planning, it's this use of technology. And I want to talk to you about artificial intelligence and some of the consternation, I think, from performers around its use in music. But presumably technology plays a big part in the organization side of what you're doing and a big part in your own business as well at the moment.
Well, hugely, certainly from estate planning. We had the opportunity back in 2019 to create a new business, and we very much grasped that opportunity with the advent of sort of COVID and post-COVID. We all had, as you know, anybody in estate planning has had to learn to work in a very different way. So the switch from face-to-face meetings certainly to more kind of online meetings, and the use of technology. And so there's been a lot of adaptation. We've certainly adapted, and we took the opportunity. And I have to say, I take no credit for this because Andrew Cooper, my co-director, has got a tech background, and he worked his socks off making sure that we had the right platforms in place within the business. So Legacy Solutions is largely a tech-driven business. We've got multiple processes and systems within, and virtually, not all together, but virtually paperless these days in terms of how we conduct the business.
And as I say, artificial intelligence or machine learning or large language models, that kind of thing, they're a growing part of that technology that's coming into estate planning. But as I say, I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on the impact that it's having on the creative industries and of course on the music industry as well. Very famously, only a couple of months ago, there was an album of complete silence launched, wasn't there, in sort of protest to AI?
Yes, I vaguely remember that piece of PR. Yeah, and it's interesting response to AI. Certainly from a business perspective, we typically kind of use AI for the construction of marketing material, etc. But it largely stops there. I rather suspect AI is going to play a much bigger part in the estate planning sector, a much bigger part. And I'm really not fearful of it. I embrace technology. I've always embraced technology, but I'm very, very curious as to how it's going to affect our industry. I think 10 years from now, we're not going to be in the same industry that we are now. Certainly from a music perspective, there's an awful lot of chatter in the music industry about this. I had a conversation last week with the film producer who's been helping to produce these music videos that we just recorded, and she was telling me about a virtual AI band. They've just streamed over 1 million streams on social and on streaming platforms. I find that a bit scary, I have to say, but inevitable, I think.
In the business world, we recognize that AI has the ability to kind of complement what we're doing. I think we're sort of largely moved past the scary bit, and we recognize its value. But I can absolutely see that in the creative world, there's a real sort of tete-a-tete here if we're not too careful. Or do you see that actually it does have a role to complement what you do?
We seem to be gravitating from kind of authentic creativity. At music college, I did composition and performance studies. So a good deal of my time was spent, learning the discipline of composing music, and then, arranging that music, and then assembling a kind of a group of musicians, and then performing that music. There seems to be a move away from that, and I'm not sure quite at what point we started, that sort of journey. And inevitably, there's going to be a pull towards the use of AI, in the music industry, in the creative industry. I think it's inevitable, but I do think, there does seem to be a groundswell for, younger generations who are hankering after authenticity and originality. And, and actually, I'm about to launch an album, which launches later this year, 90 minutes from New York to Paris. It's called, by the way, just saying. And
simple plug.
Thank you. And that album will principally go out on vinyl, rather than CD. Yeah, so we're actually producing it as a vinyl album, as well as obviously the online streaming. There's just something about that tactile, sort of having a something that people can keep and, and actually become a collector's item in a way. Well, most of my music does end up being collector's items stuck on shelves, but anyway, we won't go there.
I think we talked about this in the sort of run up to planning this podcast, actually, but there's a real difference between the creative side of what you do in terms of the music and that kind of thing, and then the analytical side of what you do, which is running the business. And I mean, you've mentioned Andrew once or twice already, and his value to the business. How do you manage that dynamic between so the creativity, if you like, of the music and the analytical of the business? Do you compartmentalize? Do you think the two complement one another?
Surprisingly similar, actually, and that may sound contradictory, but they are surprisingly similar insofar as there is a close association between music and mathematics, for example. I won't get into things like the cycle of fifths, for example, in music, but even for non-musicians, just jump online and have a look at the cycle of fifths, and particularly some of the images and the diagrams on cycle of fifths. And you'll notice that when you look at the cycle of fifths, which is a mathematical formula for learning, kind of scales and arpeggios and all sorts of things. But if you look at that and you study that, there's actually a mathematical formula that's going on. It's called the cycle of fifths because it's based upon sort of fifth steps, and then you've got kind of chords that have intervals, kind of root and third and fifth and seventh, and, diminished and hop. Anyway, but yeah, there is a mathematical formula. And as a performing musician, and particularly going back to my days at sort of the disciplines at music college, that stuff is drummed into you day in, day out, 6 hours a day, kind of going around that stuff and practicing. The segue between, the kind of creative and the mathematical formula fits very well together, actually. So now that said, I have to find a way of partitioning the time, the discipline within music, but the disciplines within estate planning. And that, again, just comes down to very strict discipline time management.
It's quite a journey from music college in Greenwich to estate planning. Not a natural sort of course, John. How did that come about?
I always knew that an absence of music in my life would make me a very grumpy person, and so I had to find a way of doing it. Anybody who knows me well knows that if you take music out of my life, I'm just going to be, not very nice to be around, grumpy. So it's always been a part of my life. The music side of things, I had to find a way of integrating that. I was very fortunate. Many years ago, I started my very first estate planning company, Heritage Legal and Financial, based in Norwich. In actual fact, with that company, we went from ground zero. I started at my kitchen table, and then 12 years later, we were turning over 1.8 million, and we were employing about 60 staff. So I was fortunate enough, and that big business became mature, to actually step back and take out time, to go to music college. So I actually had 3 years break, went to music college, and then re-engaged with the business again. So I've always danced between the two, actually, in all reality.
I think there is probably a very incorrect view of what being a musician's like. There's people might consider it to be very glamorous, particularly if they look on social media. Give us an insight into what the reality of being a musician is. I mean, for starters, an hour's practice every morning as a discipline is a bit of an insight, I guess, John.
When we recorded the last album, we did all the preparation rehearsals at the Premises in Hackney in London. I don't know whether you would be aware of the Premises. It's certainly, it's an iconic sort of music venue, in amongst musicians. I mean, everybody really from Amy Winehouse, Al Green have recorded there, Nina Simone, the Arctic Monkeys, Jamie Cullum, you name it. When you go into the Premises, there's a cafe that they have, very nice cafe actually. All around the wall, they've got photographs of different musicians who have signed their photographs, Amy Winehouse and these people. I mean, it's just palpable, really. You can actually feel the atmosphere in that place as soon as you walk through the door. It's just a magical environment to be in, really. Very inspirational as well. Certainly, that's an extremely enjoyable part of the music business. I've been very fortunate with my music. I've been able to tour in over the years in Europe and New York, London, of course. It's taken me all over the world. Everywhere I go, if I'm going on holiday, my flute goes with me, much to the annoyance of my wife sometimes, but it's part of me, really. That's the way I kind of see it. But so that part of the music industry is very inspirational. There is the mundane side of the music industry. For example, when I was at music college, I would, and since actually, I would often go to sleep at night with a set of headphones in, earbuds or headphones as they were then, either with a metronome going in my ears as I went to sleep, just to get perfection on timing, or I would actually have scales running in my ears as I went to sleep. So, sort of major scales, minor scales, diminished scales, half diminished scales, you name it, and I did that for several years. It started to drive me slightly potty, actually, to be honest with you. But that's just the mundane stuff that you have to go through as a professional musician, and to operate at that level. We've just confirmed the band for the album launch in next May. A lot of them are coming from the Jules Holland band, guys who have played with Arctic Monkeys, guys who have played with M People. So all of that is is part and parcel of it, but there is a mundane side to it for sure.
I might describe it as a commitment to a craft rather than mundane.
Yes, you could describe it that way, but I think for me it's more of an obsession, frankly.
I started out the recording suggesting that there was a tenuous link between being a musician and being in business, but my suspicion is there's an awful lot more, actually, that the disciplines that are needed, the focus, the commitment to your craft are as prevalent in music as they are in business and by extension in estate planning, John. As a sort of final roundup, I suppose, tell me about some of the skills that you think are needed to be both a successful musician and successful in business as well.
Well, you've got the normal crossovers, with those disciplines. You have to be fairly analytical. That's true both in music and in business, and that's particularly true, of the creative process of music. If I'm doing composition, it requires a level of sort of analytical thought. As far as business is concerned, over the years, I've learned some valuable lessons. I did spend 10 years as a training and management consultant for an organization called the Wilshire Group, actually. Their main target audience was corporate, so kind of work with corporate organizations. So I was able to learn a lot of corporate disciplines during that time, and management practices which have served me very well within our businesses over the years, and particularly more recently Your Legacy Solutions. I'm exceptionally blessed with an amazing team around me, people like Maeve Minogue, who's our director of administration, and she's absolutely meticulous when it comes to administrative and compliance side of what we do. Claire Ling, so Claire's my PA, and she does a lot of our appointment scheduling. Claire's, I was going to say 15 years, but Claire's been with us now with me for 20 years, over 3 companies. So each time I've moved companies, here Claire has moved over with me, and as she often likes to say, she's like my second wife. Probably knows more about me than my wife does. So, and can be slightly bossy at times as well. So, those key people in the business really are, fundamental, instrumental.
I think in particular in small organizations, and I count today's media as a small organization, John, that recruitment process and those people around you, so important. You can have all the processes and systems in place that you want, and technology plays a wonderful part in our business life, but you still need people. And I think particularly in estate planning, that empathetic element that comes with people is so important. So I wholeheartedly agree on that front. we're at the end of the time that we have for the podcast. It's been great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining. You've got an album out at some point as well in the not too distant future, and you say you've been recording the video for that as well.
We've just completed the recording, the filming of 2 music videos in Spain. It was produced by Light Engine Films, with a crew and a cast, and all the resources and camera crew that went over to Spain to record those 2 music videos. They were intentionally put together for promotion of my album launch, which is coming up next year at the World Heartbeat Music Academy, right next to the American Embassy in London. That's a formal album launch with press and media. And by the way, you're very welcome. You're invited to come along, David, yourself.
Very kind, John. Thank you.
With your lovely wife, of course. That's a 10-piece band, actually, so it's quite a handful, to put together. But that's on the 9th of May 2026, World Heartbeat Music Academy. Anybody who wants to find out more about that, they can go to my website, www.johnheavens.com.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for joining, John, and for sharing your story.
Been lovely to talk to you, David.
The Today's Wills and Probate podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on today'swillsandprobate.co.uk. My thanks to John. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Wills and Probate podcast, one of the leading sources of information for the wills and probate sector. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at today'swillsandprobate.co.uk and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.